On April 1st, 2006, a 27-year-old medical student walked into a bar in Columbus, Ohio. Security cameras caught him going in. They never caught him coming out. The bar had only one public exit. 50 police officers searched for him. The FBI got involved. And 20 years later, Brian Shaffer has never been found.
Brian Randall Shaffer was not the kind of person who just disappears. He was 27 years old, 6'2", and in his second year at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. He had a girlfriend he was planning to propose to. Her name was Alexis Wagoner, also a medical student. They had a spring break trip booked to Miami, just days away. By every account, Brian had everything to live for.
But 3 weeks before that night, tragedy had already found him. His mother, Renee Shaffer, died of a rare blood cancer called myelodysplasia. Brian and his father, Randy, were devastated. Still, by all accounts, Brian was pushing forward. The Miami trip was supposed to be a fresh start.
March 31st, 2006, the last day of classes at Ohio State before spring break. Brian had dinner with his father at a local steakhouse that evening. They were still grieving together. But afterward, Brian insisted on going out. He called up his friend and former roommate, Clint Florence, and the two of them began bar hopping near the Ohio State campus. They bounced from bar to bar through the evening, ending up finally at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a popular college bar located on the second floor of the Gateway complex at 1546 North High Street. It was just past 1 a.m.
Here is where things get strange. Security cameras outside the Ugly Tuna captured Brian, Clint, and a woman named Meredith Reed riding the escalator up to the second floor entrance at 1:15 a.m. They went inside. The night continued normally until it didn't. At around 1:55 a.m., the cameras caught Brian one more time. But this time, he was outside the bar's entrance on the escalator level, chatting casually with two women he had just met. Their names were Brighton Zatko and Amber Ruick. They talked for a few minutes. Then Brian smiled, turned, and walked back toward the bar's entrance, and disappeared off camera. That was the last confirmed sighting of Brian Shaffer. Ever. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., Clint Florence waited outside. He expected Brian to come walking down the escalator with everyone else. He never did. Clint assumed Brian had found his own way home. He went home too. That was a mistake no one knew they were making.
Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, couldn't reach him the next day, or the day after that. She waited in his apartment, hoping he'd walk through the door. On April 3rd, the day they were supposed to board their flight to Miami together, Brian was officially reported missing to Columbus police. Within days, up to 50 police officers were involved in the search. Friends, family, classmates were all questioned. Almost everyone agreed to polygraph tests. Almost everyone. One person refused, but we'll get to that.
Here is what makes this case unlike almost any other missing persons case you've heard of. The bar had only one public entrance and exit. The same escalator you walked up was the only way down. Security cameras covered it. No footage shows Brian leaving. He walked back toward the entrance and simply ceased to exist on camera. There was one other possibility investigators eventually considered. A service door at the back of the building,
normally used by staff, which led out to a construction area. It was not covered by cameras. Could Brian have left through there? And if so, why? And where did he go?
Some investigators and researchers have suggested Brian may have chosen to disappear. His mother had just died. Some who knew him said there was a hidden side to Brian, that beneath the clean-cut medical student image was someone who wasn't entirely happy. Private investigators who dug deeper found that Brian had interests and habits his family didn't know about. In 2020, the FBI examined a photo of a man in Mexico that a tipster believed was Brian. It was not him, but the fact that people were looking in Mexico suggests some believe he could be alive. Both the private investigator hired by Brian's father and a former Columbus police detective who worked the case believe Brian was the victim of foul play. Columbus police have never officially named a suspect, but they have confirmed there are persons of interest. In 2026, new details emerged. Investigators had obtained a search warrant to dig up the basement floor of a house near Lane Avenue, tied to a person of interest. They dug and found only an old fuel oil tank. The case remains open. Among every
Questioned, one person stood out. Brian's roommate refused to take a polygraph test. Police have never said he is a suspect, but in a case built almost entirely on absence of evidence, that refusal has never sat easy with investigators, or with the public who have followed this case for 20 years.
It has now been 20 years. The ugly Tuna Saloona no longer exists. The bar has been closed and the Gateway complex has changed. Brian's father Randy passed away without ever knowing what happened to his son. His girlfriend Alexis has moved on with her life. The former detective who led the investigation, John Hurst, has said publicly, "It stuck with me. It'll probably stick with me till it's either solved or the day I die." An age progression photo has been released showing what Brian might look like today as a 47-year-old man. Tips still come in. Sightings are still reported. Someone out there knows something. And until that person speaks, Brian Shaffer remains exactly where he's been since April 1st, 2006. Missing.
If you've never heard this case before, now you have. And if you know something, the Columbus Police Department tip line is still open 20 years later. Drop your theories in the comments. What do you think happened to Brian Shaffer? I want to know. Subscribe for more cases like this. There are more stories that the world has forgotten. I won't let them.